Well, good afternoon. I know I have a high-pressure position here because I'm the only thing between you and a bathroom break. So I'll try to keep this going. My topic is the prehistoric astronomy of central Arizona. There's only 4 certified archaeoastronomers in the state of Arizona. Brian Bates up here in the Flagstaff area, and he covers all of northern Arizona. Todd Bostwick with ASU and the Pueblo Grande Museum does the Phoenix Basin. John Fountain does with the University of Arizona, does the Tucson Basin. And my area is central Arizona, basically stretching from the Verde Valley to the New Mexico border. And I've been looking at sites all the way to the New Mexico border, and basically looking for patterns between Sinagua and Mogollon astronomical practices. So basically, archaeoastronomy, which used to be called cultural astronomy, in England they call it astroarchaeology, but it's basically the study of prehistoric civilizations, the use of the sky, the purposes they used it for, such as calendars, agriculture, rituals, ceremonies, mythology. And it draws from a variety of disciplines: astronomy, archaeology, ethnology, used to identify and interpret these ancient inscriptions. The southwestern techniques generally are sighting, where they would look along the horizon and see where the sun would rise each day or set each day. And that's used very extensively here in the central Verde Valley area. Imaging is another area where they would use rock art and shadow lines and such effects to determine things. The third method is architectural, where they would use buildings and alignments. I have yet to find any in the Verde Valley or going all the way to the New Mexico border, but we keep looking. I'm going to start with a very quick little overview of some of the sites. I'm up to about 12 sites now that are either completed or are in process. The rule that I have, given to me by Peter Pillis, is that when I find a site, I record it for an entire year, every month for a whole year, so that I can show that the effect that I observe is only happening at the specific times that is significant. And if I don't find it in the first year of sunrises, I go and look for a whole year at sunsets to see what's going on. And then if possible, I do the same site for a whole second year to validate the first year's observations. So the most simplest is sighting sites. And those are, to me, the most exciting. I try to find places where there is no rock art, there are no structures, but where would a sun watcher at a particular village or Pueblo site, where would he have sat and watched the horizon and made his recordings every day? And if I can find one of those sites, to me that's actually more exciting than any of the others. The Honaki site was kind of frustrating because the rock art there did not appear and does not appear to produce any kind of effects. There's one in particular I have to go back and look at, but absent a very obvious one, I figured there had to be a sun watcher at the Honaki site to be able to decide when to plant and do ceremonies. And from the Honaki site, you cannot see sunrise. But if you follow Loy Butte around until you get around the outer edge, you finally get to see the horizon, the eastern horizon up here. And when we came around the edge, I noted this particular little rock sticking out there. And on the top, you'll see is a smoothed out little pothole kind of area here. And here is a petroglyph of a half sun. And this direction is facing southeast, facing the sunrise position. And interestingly, found a quote in an autobiography. Actually, he was describing his father, who was a sun watcher. And he said that his father would observe the horizon from a natural bowl in a rock, a kind of smoothed out pothole, and he would record his readings inside that bowl. And lo and behold, here we have a bowl facing southeast, and this petroglyph of the sun in it. And actually I went back and re-looked at it closer, and actually this line goes all the way across it. I showed it to a Hopi when we were up in Second Mesa, and he just about fell over. He said, "That's my clan symbol, that's the Sun Forehead clan." And I did not realize that my clan was at Honaki. So he wants to come down and have me take him over there. But this is the type of thing that really gets me going, to find a place where a sun watcher 1,000 years ago actually sat and observed. And I have 2 other sites, and I can't show you today, but 2 other sites that I'm sure I can prove was used by a sun watcher to sit and observe the horizons. Another one at Polacki. A lot of people have been to Polacki. This was an interesting rock art feature here. You've got a pictograph here. It's hard to see in this picture, but there's a black triangle right here inside this one. Right over here, between these two, there's a double black triangle. And then, of course, you have this big sun. And interestingly, when you compare it to the horizon just behind it, here you have a red cliff, a red cliff, a red cliff, a red cliff. They're all opened up red. And here you have a white one, filled in white. Here's a white rectangle. Here's your white rectangle. And then it goes red again, which is over here. And so watching that for a whole year, observing at sunrise what's going on, turns out that, sure enough, where the black triangle is where the sun rises at winter solstice. Where the double triangle is where the sun rises at spring and fall equinox. And where this little ball here is, right to the left of the rectangular white, is where the summer solstice sun rises. So what we have here at Polacki in the grotto area is a pictograph that is basically a reminder for himself or for future sun watchers what to watch for on that horizon. So here's another sun watcher shot that somebody sat there for who knows how many hundreds of years and observed the sun and told everybody what was going on. Another spot at Polacki, and this one Peter said, oh, people are bugging me, they think this is a sun thing, go check it out, see what you think. And it's over at the roasting pit area, and you have this image here that a lot of people are very familiar with. But really what struck me, when I look at sites like this, I look for little oddities that might help out things. And so what I noticed is that there's a little line here, a little line here, and a little line here in these three quadrants, but nothing here. And so that started to concern me a little bit, at least to watch what was going on. And sure enough, on the equinox, and it highlighted there, on the equinox, the sun comes across on a diagonal right in line with these two particular lines. And this only happens on the equinoxes. Well, watching this for the whole year at sunrise, this little mark in this quadrant never came into play. It never does anything else the rest of the year of any significance, and it started to really bug me. And Peter loves patterns, and if you've got something that breaks a pattern, you've got to wonder, is this really a pattern, or is there something funny going on here, or are you just smoking something? So since sunrises didn't produce anything, I started to go out at sunsets for a whole year, and sure enough, eventually found that at sunset, 30 days before spring equinox and 30 days after fall equinox, what you get is this little guy is now in play. You get a little dagger of sunshine that comes in right to the center, comes right back out along this line. So these two guys are in play at this particular time, at sunset. But why it's only the 30 days before spring, or were they trying to mark the 30 days after fall, I have yet to figure out. So I'm still going through ethnographic items to see if I can figure out why they would have done that. But at least what this shows is that these little things that I call register marks are significant in calendars. And you'll see coming up that the use of register marks by the Sinagua was actually a regular feature. Okay. Now we'll go to Vbar, and this is actually what started me going in 2005 with this. And Vbar, a lot of you are familiar with Vbar, but it was a working cattle ranch into the 1980s. Forest Service acquired it in 94 in a land trade with the University of Arizona, and they studied it extensively in 94-5 and opened it to the public in 96. And the particular panel, which I call a solar panel, is this one particular one, and it has these series of concentric circles across the wall here. It has this oddity little stair-steppy thing here. It's got a couple snakes that turned out to be part of the calendar, and it's got this really weird little thing that looks like two little sickles, and we'll get into that. But in looking at that, the first thing that what started this whole journey, if you will, was the equinox. And on the equinox, what I observed was that you have this shaft of sunlight, and if you're not there exactly on the equinox, it won't happen because the sun is moving fairly quickly at this time of the year. But these two are in perfect alignment on that day, and the width of it is perfectly aligned with this one over here. You'll only get this pattern on the first day of spring and the first day of fall. This last year, and this is a good example, and thankfully I explained it before we started, but we had about 100 people at Vbar for the equinox, the fall equinox, and the astronomers said that the equinox is on September 23. Well, I took this picture on September 21st several years ago, And what I'm finding with the equinox is the equinox, basically they're looking at the horizon, trying to determine when the sun was at the farthest to the north for the summer, farthest to the south for winter, and somewhere in the middle on the horizon for the equinox. Well, as you can imagine, if you're looking at a mountain range, where is the center? And what I'm finding is they're often off, astronomically speaking, by 1 or 2 days. Sometimes they're right on the button, but other times they're a day early or day late from when the sun is actually perfectly aligned with the equator, which they obviously would not have known. So when you study or looking for equinox, you generally have to go a couple days before the astronomically determined day and just go every single day until you figure out what day did they think the equinox was. And it'll be close, but it won't always be exactly. Turns out that this particular pattern was perfect on September 21st this year, and on September 23, it was off because the sun was already going south and it was actually just a little bit into this guy. It was not touching him, it was into him already. So a day and a half after this, on the 21st, on the 23rd, when the astronomers said the equinox was, it wasn't, as far as the Sinagua was concerned. So it was a good little lesson for the 100 people that were sitting there as to what you have to do. I'm going to skip some of the dates, but on May 21st, well, we noticed, you see a number of alignments here. This shadow line is perfectly framed by these two edges. This one is down the center, and it's at the head of the snake, which is kind of strange. And the width here is exactly the width of that particular snake. Okay. This snake here, and I say snake loosely because it really isn't, but it's a time marker. This one is to mark it so that they get the exact right day. This one has a dot here, or a little cupule. It has a little cupule over here and a little cupule over here there, so it's clearly not a snake. A Hopi that was at the site said, oh, this is a time marker. So I'm going back and re-looking at 4 years of photographs to see if I can figure out exactly what significance this particular thing has. And then there's this, which we'll talk about in a second. But why May 21st was significant is when you look up close, what you find is that right in the middle of the sun shaft is a shaft of corn. And this is the same symbol that is up at Picture Rock that Hopi have always interpreted as a corn plant. And so there's actually 3 corn plants on this wall that actually get touched at the time of an early corn planting, a full corn planting, and a late corn planting. So in addition to the seasonal, we also have a corn planting calendar here as well. Summer solstice, and I show this just to show the whole effect of it. The 2 boulders up here are what's producing the effects. We have some, this one we're pretty sure is naturally there, except there's a little piece that's cut out here that's producing the second shaft of light that produces an interesting effect in July. The top rock here, we have a couple questions about. The geologist that's looked at it thinks that it has been manipulated in some way. We would need to get up close to look at it. But one of the most significant things is we had an Archaeoastronomy conference in Camp Verde in 2009, I'm sorry. And as a field trip, 45 of them came out to Vbar. And these were people from England to LA to all over the place, all astronomers, physicists, engineers that came out to look at it. And we were only there, well, we were there on the 14th, so we were about a week before the summer solstice, but they got to see exactly what was happening here. And after they saw the effect, they said, oop, yep, I can see exactly what's going to happen in a week. I said, keep watching this shaft here. And so they kept watching it, and I didn't hear them say anything. And about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes go by, and all of a sudden, like in unison, they all go, wait a minute, that shadow hasn't changed. It hasn't moved. It hasn't changed shape. It stayed exactly the same for the past 20 minutes. And I said, keep watching it. It stayed in the exact same spot for an hour. And that can't happen because the sun is moving. And so what we all concluded was that when you're up there close, this rock is curved. And the only way that this could not change shape or position for an hour is if at the time of the summer solstice, the curve of that rock matches the arc of the sun for that 1 hour period. And there's only one other site in Southwest, in Colorado, where they've proven that they worked the edge of a stone so that the shadow effect would remain for an extended period of time. Because the sun is constantly moving, these shadow lines are constantly shifting and changing shape. So another thing we really need to figure out is, did they actually work that edge? So another little mystery here. So summer solstice, we have a whole bunch of things going on. This shaft again is framed by these two. You can see the snake position has changed. Now the head of this snake is at the outer edge here, and it's basically 3 lengths here, and it ends almost here, but not quite. So I'm still very confused about this guy. But the significant thing was that this is the farthest the sun will move, and it is perfectly parallel to these 2 arched figures. And when you get up close to these 2 arched figures, they each have 2 little feet. And you've got a little asterisk here that often represents the sun. So what you really have here are 2 bent over dancing figures dancing to the sun at the time of the summer solstice. And Hopi do have a ceremony called the home dance that's done shortly after the summer solstice. Then at winter solstice, and I'm jumping over to a couple other significant items because of time, we have what I'm calling the sun pinnacle here. And there's this gap here. And as we were watching and waiting for the winter solstice, we noticed that as the sun is passing across here, making its transit from east to west, it's getting lower and lower in the sky. And around December 1st, we noticed that it's passing right at the very top of this thing. And so we kept watching it, and every day it's getting lower and lower and lower. And sure enough, on the winter solstice, what we get is that the sun passes exactly at the very bottom of that little opening. And there's quite a bit of rubble down here. And so the big question is, did they put rubble in here to mark the very bottom position of where the sun passes the winter solstice? The little bit that you can see here is that's open. There is a lot of rubble on the ground below, so possibly some of it has fallen down. But they could not have seen this. This would have burned out their eyes to look at this. But this is actually taken through a filter used for solar observations. But what they would have seen on the ground before them would have been this dagger of sun that's in the shape of that opening there that appears here. Now, interestingly, during the excavation, and you can still see a little bit of the excavation pit right here, it was established that there's about 4 feet of dirt at the wall that wasn't there when the Sinagua were here. Right now, this tip is laying on the ground. So the big question is, if this dirt wasn't here and this was laying flat up against these rocks, is there a concentric circle, maybe a foot or 2 feet down, that tip would have hit? That would have also told them when the winter solstice occurred. But somebody wouldn't let us move this little hole from here to there. Okay? So we'll never know. Okay, moving on to another site that's pretty interesting. Herrera Canyon, if you're familiar with Herrera Canyon, Red Tank Draw is way down here, and eventually, as it gets into Mogan Rim, it becomes Herrera Canyon. And off on the side, on this very precarious little cliff, some of you may be familiar with it, called Spirit Hunter Site, there's this huge boulder here with this very, very large spiral and other things going on. And that was suggested by a Jeep company that this was a summer solstice marker, and they were taking people out there to show them the summer solstice marker. So we decided, well, let's just verify for them, but following Peter's rule, go down there every single month and see what's going on. And it turns out that it's another one of these all full year calendar sites. So on the equinox, what you get is the sun comes across the center. And you see this little point here, makes a little jog up, comes back down, and actually goes into a little concentric circle down here. And you look at a big spiral like this, and you might say, well, how do they know where the center is? I mean, is that really the center, or is the center a little bit over to the right or a little bit to the left? How do they know? Well, what they did, here's another register mark. It's in perfect alignment with that shadow line on the equinox. So it comes along this little register mark, comes back up, comes through, and back through the concentric circle down here. So again, a use of register marks. On the summer solstice, they got something similar. It comes across through the center, and you can see it makes a little jag down here, and then it hits in a little triangle right to the center of this spiral, and then tapers off like that. Winter is very interesting. It actually produces a wedge of sun that comes out from the center, and at the bottom, the shadow line goes across the bottom, shoots up to the center of this guy again, and comes back out again. The chances of this being accidental is highly remote. Brian Bates, who does, as I said, this is kind of like on the border somewhere between his territory and my territory, so he's been down there, and he's actually recorded this for cross-quarter dates, the dates between equinoxes and solstices, and he's shown that, in fact, it does also mark cross-quarter dates. So it's a pretty elaborate calendar in this extremely remote and rather precarious place to get to. And then this one, I think I'm going to end with this. This is another one that Peter said, gee, why don't you go take a look at this thing. This is an 85-foot long snake. It's 85 feet from the end to the end. Meanders across this plateau. This is perfectly north-south, so you get a great east-west transit. And there's a break, you can't see it, but there's a little break in the wall over here, and then there's this very wide break here. But opposite this wide break are these uprighted rocks, clearly manufactured. They're in a perfectly upright position here. And so, again, going out there every month, seeing what's going on. This is the end of it, the mouth, if you will. As the snake meanders across here, and it kind of like wiggles along, it gets to the end here, and then it opens up into like a mouth with this rock that looks kind of like a tongue coming out of it, which makes it even more looking like a serpent, if you will. And what we found is, this is on summer solstice, and you can actually see that pretty clearly there. At sunrise, the sun comes through the opening here, and it goes right across here and the sun lights up this boulder. And then there's another shaft of light at the opposite end of the snake, comes through here and hits at this boulder. Only happens at the summer solstice, these two shafts of light. And then at equinox, what's interesting is the sun is rising exactly behind these rocks. And so what you get is this dagger of shadow that goes through the opening there. Again, only happens on the equinox. And then when you get to winter, winter sunrise didn't do anything. But at sunset, and this is another pattern I'm seeing, at some sites they used the sun rises through spring equinox and summer solstice, and then you would use sunsets for fall equinox and winter solstice at some locations. And so what you get at sunrise is and again, you can't really see it because of the angle here, but there's a little opening here, and the sun sets right through here, throws a line and lights up this little boulder here. And there actually is another one that comes through here, but it doesn't really do anything here. So this is at sunset on the winter solstice. So we have quite a variety of methods that are used by the Sinagua, and I'm looking for patterns with the Mogollon. But I really like this particular quote from Margaret Mead, and I think it sums up archaeoastronomy. Anthropology demands an open-mindedness with which one must look and listen, record in astonishment and wonder that which one would not have been able to guess. And that's, to me, is the creed of an archaeoastronomer. You really have to look at these sites and really open your mind and really watch for things and just observe. So thank you very much.